Welcome to Wisdom Trek with Gramps. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, and we are on day 2543 of our trek. The purpose of Wisdom Trek is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, and to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. In today's Wisdom Nugget, we'll be exploring Psalm 41, focusing on verses 1 through 3 from the New Living Translation. This passage offers a powerful message of God's blessing for those who care for the poor, His protection in times of trouble, and His ability to restore health and strength. In these few verses, David paints a picture of what it means to live a life that reflects God's heart, one that cares for the most vulnerable and trusts in God's provision during life's difficult moments. Let's begin by reading this passage together. Psalm chapter 41, verses 1 through 3. Oh, the joy of those who are kind to the poor! The Lord rescues them when they are in trouble. The Lord protects them and keeps them alive. He gives them prosperity in the land and rescues them from their enemies. The Lord nurses them when they are sick and restores them to health. David opens the psalm by highlighting the joy and blessings that come from showing kindness to the poor. Oh, the joy of those who are kind to the poor! The Lord rescues them when they are in trouble. This verse is more than just a call for charity. It reflects God's character. Throughout Scripture, God consistently shows His heart for the poor, the needy, and the oppressed. When we care for the poor, we align ourselves with His values and demonstrates His love in action. David doesn't simply say, be kind to the poor because it's the right thing to do. He goes a step further by pointing out there are tangible blessings for those who practice compassion. Specifically, he mentions the Lord rescues them in times of trouble. This shows that kindness isn't just about helping others. It's also a way of opening ourselves to God's help and protection. There's a story of a man during a harsh winter who gave his coat to somebody who was homeless. Though it left him cold for a little while, he later found warmth in the kindness of a stranger who offered him shelter. This story illustrates the truth that we often see in life. When we care for others, God's blessings have a way of finding us, often in ways we don't expect. David's words encourage us to look beyond ourselves and to seek ways to serve those who are in need, knowing that when we do, God sees our action and responds in His own kindness. In verse 2, David expands on the blessings that come from those who care for the poor. The Lord protects them and keeps them alive. He gives them prosperity in the land and rescues them from their enemies. This verse emphasizes that God's protection is comprehensive. He not only keeps us safe, He also sustains us and ensures that we have what we need to thrive. When David says He gives them prosperity in the land, it is important to understand that prosperity isn't solely about material wealth. In a biblical sense, prosperity also often refers to well-being, peace, and the fulfillment of God's promises. David is highlighting those who reflect God's compassion and can expect His favor in multiple areas of their lives. The phrase, rescues them from their enemies, reminds us that life's challenges, whether external conflicts or internal struggles, are no match for God's power. When we live with a heart of kindness and trust in God, He becomes our defender. This verse invites us to trust in God's protection and provision, especially when we are facing difficulties. It also reminds us that our kindness toward others isn't just a one-sided act. It's part of the relationship where God, in turn, cares for us. When we live generously and compassionately, we position ourselves to experience God's abundant care. In verse 3, it offers us a beautiful promise of God's healing. The Lord nurses them when they are sick and restores them to health. Here David describes God as a caregiver, someone who personally tends to the needs of those who are unwell. This imagery is both comforting and deeply personal. It shows us that God isn't distant or detached from our sufferings. Instead, He is intimately involved in bringing us comfort and restoration. The word nurses implies a gentle, attentive care. Just as a nurse watches over a patient, ensuring that they receive the right treatment and attention, God watches over us in our weakest moments. Whether we are facing physical challenges, emotional pain, or spiritual fatigue, God is there, offering us healing in His perfect way and timing. I once heard about a woman who spent months recovering from a serious illness. She shared how, in her darkest days, she felt God's presence in small, quiet moments, through the care of a friend, the encouragement of a kind word, or the peace that came during prayer. Her story reminds me of David's description of how God nurses us, tending to our needs in both ways seen and unseen. This verse also invites us to reflect on how we can be God's hands and feet in the lives of others. Just as God nurses and restores, we're called to care for those who are hurting, offering them hope and comfort in their time of need. Psalm chapter 41, verses 1 through 3 offers several key themes and lessons that are just as relevant today as they were in David's time. Let's take a closer look at these. First, kindness reflects God's heart. Caring for the poor and needy isn't just a good deed, it's a way of aligning ourselves with God's values. When we show compassion, we reflect God's love and bring joy into our lives. Second, God's protection is comprehensive. David reminds us that God's protection covers every area of our lives. He not only rescues us from trouble, but also sustains us, blesses us, and defends us from harm. Third, God is a healer. In our moments of weakness, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, God offers His healing and restoration. He is a compassionate caregiver who meets us where we are and brings us back to health. And fourth, blessings come through generosity. David highlights the connection between generosity and blessings. When we live with open hands, offering help to those who are in need, we open ourselves to receive God's blessing in return. How can we apply this passage to our daily lives? Well, here are a few practical steps. We need to look for opportunities to serve. Each day presents opportunities to show kindness, whether through giving to somebody in need, offering a listening ear, or simply being present for somebody who's hurting. Ask God to open your eyes to those opportunities. Next, we need to trust in God's protection. When we are facing challenges, remember that God is your protector and provider. Lean on His promises, knowing that He watches over you. Also, be a source of healing. Just as God nurses and restores, look for ways to bring comfort and encouragement to those who are struggling. Whether it's through a kind word, a thoughtful gesture, or simply being present, your actions can reflect God's care. And finally, live with an attitude of gratitude. As you experience God's blessing, take time to thank Him and share His goodness with others. Gratitude fuels generosity and helps us to live with joy. As we reflect on Psalm 41, verses 1 through 3, we see a beautiful picture of God's heart for compassion, protection, and healing. David's words challenge us to live with kindness, trust in God's care, and be a source of comfort to those around us. Thank you for joining me today on our Wisdom Trek. As you go about your week, I encourage you to look for opportunities to reflect God's heart through acts of kindness, trust Him to protect and sustain you, and rest in His promise to heal and restore. Until the next time, may God's wisdom guide your steps, and may His peace fill your hearts. And if you found this podcast insightful, please subscribe and leave us a review. Then encourage your friends and family to join us and come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, creating a legacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, and most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal. And as we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and create a great day every day. See you next time for more daily wisdom.